ask whether British soldiers should be exempted from human rights laws. Plus, an independent group says our definition of terrorism is now too broad. Some really important stories today. Join me, please, after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, MPs have been told 91 inmates have been accidentally released from prisons in England and Wales in a 7-month period. A new board has been set up to tackle the jail's crisis. Justice Secretary David Lammy has accepted the government must bear down on the numbers. His Tory shadow, Robert Jenrick's, told the Commons the Deputy Prime Minister is clueless.
The criminal justice system, under his watch, has been made to look a total mockery. The public are being put at risk. In his own words, Mr. Speaker, it's time for him to get a grip or go.
Ministers will reconsider a decision to not award compensation to the so-called WASPy women. The Work and Pensions Secretary says the government will look again at claims by women born in the 1950s whose state pension age was raised to be equal with men. Campaigners say it's a step forward. LBC has seen exclusive polling that shows 80% of people are worried about their data being stolen if digital ID cards are brought in. The government wants to introduce them in the next 5 years to try to tackle illegal migration and people smuggling. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 112 points at 98.99. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.14. And the LBC weather, rain easing tonight and moving into the east. Mild in the south, but chilly in the north with a low of 6 degrees. Rain will move north tomorrow, leaving clear spells behind and a high of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. Let's just say it straight out. The budget is a stupid idea. Not just this budget coming later in the month, although probably that too, but the whole idea of the budget, the whole annual fandango. The big lead-up, the rumours, the leaks, the counter-leaks, the big reveal, the red box, the hysteria in the chamber, the excitement in the think tanks, the desperate journalism of the hour, the graphs, the explainers, the red books. All of it, the whole thing, should just go. This thought is provoked by today's accumulating evidence of a general economic paralysis as consumers, employers, savers and businesses wait to see what Rachel has in store. Unemployment is up to 5%, higher than predicted. Wage growth has slowed. Money is pouring out of the UK stock market. Around £7.4 billion has been withdrawn since the early summer, and £3.6 billion last month alone. Business confidence is at a new low. In the housing market, particularly in London and the south, prices are falling and there is stagnation. Whether we're talking about jobs or shares or homes, the explanations from all directions are pretty similar. Alarm about the coming budget. And in each case, it's real people that are suffering. The kid out of college who can't get a job. The business that isn't going to grow. People stuck in houses that aren't suitable for them. Pensioners worrying about whether they have got enough to get by on. And this is mostly self-inflicted damage. Our traditional political way of doing things, which is hurting the world outside Westminster. But we've always done it this way. Yes, just as we fire cannons on the King's birthday. And with the budget, that's exactly why we should stop. If the government wants to raise tax, say so. Pass a law. If they're thinking of a new kind of tax or more tax on this or that, say so. Have the debate. Be open and do it or don't do it. But this hide-and-seek annual game of bluff and double bluff, however much Westminster enjoys it, is no longer good for this country. Labour sometimes says it wants to be a more radical government. Fine. The budget? Chuck it. I began today with Michael Gove, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, now editor of The Spectator. Did he think the economic consequences of budgets generally meant that we should now ditch them?
Yes, I think it's a pantomime, and while I wouldn't want to get rid of our pantomime season overall, I think this is one performance that we can definitely do without. If the Falklands were invaded tomorrow, we wouldn't wait months before we responded. When you're facing economic bad news of this kind, then of course you should bring forward the measures required. And in fact, the whole performance is, I think, a distraction from effective economic management. And also it places, I think, almost too much responsibility onto the Chancellor's shoulders for one moment. And again, I'll have my criticisms of Rachel Reeves, but turning the whole thing into a sort of Colosseum moment, a gladiatorial contest in this way, is not sophisticated economic management.
It's great for the theatre of Parliament, it's great for journalism, but by and large, would you agree, if it's good for journalism, it's bad for the country?
Yes, I think that when Rishi Sunak was appointed Prime Minister, I remember saying at the time, boring is back, if only it had been, from the point of view of that government. You're right. Sturm und Drang, drama in the Commons, is great for us as journalists and commentators, but it detracts from effective political delivery. That doesn't mean a lack of accountability. Of course, the Chancellor of the Exchequer should be there regularly for Treasury questions, and indeed, he or she should come whenever there are urgent questions or statements that require their attention. Absolutely, parliamentary accountability matters, but putting everything in one day actually doesn't reflect the complexity and the pace of economic change that this government faces.
I'm thinking of pensioners who read about possible new imposts on their pension pot and are really worried about what to do. And I'm thinking about people who might be desperate to move house for one reason or another, unable to move house because of the freezing effect of a possible mansion tax or a possible rise in council tax or whatever it might be. Presumably, if we didn't have a budget, then the Chancellor could be asked, there are rumours about a mansion tax, and would be able to say, I'm not looking at that, or I am looking at that, without having to say, well, I can't say anything before the budget. In other words, the system would be more transparent, more open and faster.
Completely. It's a sort of ghoulish equivalent of presents under the Christmas tree, where you poke and hold them up and try and wonder what's underneath the wrapping. But the ghoulishness is in that the fact that when they're unwrapped, they will almost certainly, this year anyway, be bad news. And you're right. It has an effect on pensioners, an effect on the property market, and also an effect on inward investment into this country. There have been rumours about an exit tax on people with wealth who leave the country. I can understand completely why the Chancellor would think, I'm not having the very wealthiest, continue to treat this country almost as a sort of check-in, check-out motel. But in the meantime, it means that not just wealthy individuals, but those with the capacity to invest in our industry are experiencing a chilling effect on investment.
Let me ask you about a couple of the numbers that have come out today. You have worked in the past on so-called NEETs, people who are not in employment or at work or education. And we're seeing a rather surprising rise in unemployment at the moment. What do you think the social effect of that is going to be, particularly on all of those young people pouring out of colleges and universities and finding it very, very hard at the moment to get a job, get a first foot on the ladder?
It will be terribly scarring. The longer you spend out of the labour market, the more difficult it is to reconnect. And particularly if you've left college or you've just finished a particular course and you're looking to enter the labour market, if you find that it's more difficult to secure a job, then it is more difficult to secure the experience that future employers will look for. It is more destabilising and dispiriting. And that's why I think the national insurance increase in the budget last year, but also the potential impact of the Employment Rights Bill, create challenges. Now, they're not the only factors. There are other difficulties that business face, which lead to youth unemployment rising and unemployment overall rising. But the long-term effects on younger people of not finding meaningful work are scarring, not just for the economy, but for them and for their prospects of a brighter future.
One other number coming out at the moment, which people might find perhaps more confusing or alien almost, is the huge quantity of money, billions and billions and billions, coming out of the UK stock exchange. Can you explain to people listening why that matters?
Yes, because we need to have investment in equities and British companies in order to ensure that they can reinvest in the capital, in the equipment, in the training that leads to future growth. And so if Britain itself and if British companies are less attractive for international investors, if money is not going into the British stock market, it's not about speculation. It's about the long-term ability of those companies to be able to get money rather than just borrowing it in order to ensure that they're match fit for the future.
Very, very important. One more political question, perhaps. A lot of speculation, as we both know, about whether or not Rachel Reeves is going to break her manifesto pledge and raise income tax by perhaps a couple of pence in the pound. Regardless of whether it's the economically right thing to do, what are the political consequences? And I say that as somebody who's part of a coalition government whose Liberal Democrat partners famously promised something on education and failed to deliver it.
I think it could be devastating. We've already heard from the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Lucy Powell, a warning to Rachel Reeves not to raise income tax because it would be a breach of the manifesto. I think that the government are going to raise taxes because in the last 24 hours, Keir Starmer, and for that matter, Rachel Reeves, have made clear that they want to lift the two-child benefit cap. I think that the government is making a decision, rather like Harold Wilson in 1975, that it's going to move firmly to the left. I think that anxieties amongst its backbenchers and concern over the rise of the Green Party mean that Rachel Reeves will think fiscal responsibility, yes, but met by increasing taxes in order to have public spending, not least on benefits, increase. That may please the Parliamentary Labour Party on the day, but I think the public reaction to it will be hostile, and I think that it will be a term-limiting exercise for Rachel Reeves.
By term limiting, do you think this is one of those decisions which, once taken, make the next election almost impossible to win?
I don't think it necessarily means that the next election is impossible to win, because I think that the party landscape is so fractured that it is this far out from a general election impossible to predict. But I do think that it will be very difficult for Rachel Reeves, because she was so unequivocal before the election that there would not need to be an increase in income tax, national insurance or VAT, that if any of them were to be increased without there having been a huge external shock of the kind that a war or a worldwide recession would prove. Without that, then I think it will be very difficult. Now, it may be that she has the political skill and the communication smarts to pull it off, but it would be unprecedented, I think, for any chancellor to disavow what they'd said before an election so unequivocally and emerge unscathed, let alone be able to carry on in office until the next general election.
A final question, Michael. We are both, in different ways, ex-employees of the BBC. And the big story at the moment is that Donald Trump is threatening the BBC with a $1 billion plus lawsuit. Now, whether he's serious about this or not, thinking of the legal costs and the possibility of losing that suit, do you think the government would be well advised to promise to protect the BBC financially and in any other way?
Yes, the BBC is a hugely valuable institution, and the idea that any foreign leader, even if he has been the victim of some, sharp editing, if sharp is the word, of course the BBC needs to be protected against foreign interference. The BBC also has a number of internal challenges in terms of bias and culture and so on that it needs to address. But it's the responsibility of any British government to say that a cherished national cultural institution like the BBC does need to be protected in this way. That doesn't mean giving the BBC a blank check or endorsing every single one of its editorial decisions. Far from it. But I think that it's a preposterous act by President Trump, and we should make it clear to him that the departure of two senior BBC executives and an honest apology should be the end of the matter as far as he's concerned.
Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC today.
Thank you.
And now back to that issue of employment. A story broke this afternoon that the number of benefits claimants who have never had to work has hit a staggering 4 million. Devon Galani, the Director of Policy and Practice and one of the architects of Universal Credit, joins me now. Devon, great to have you on the show. This number of 4 million, and looking at the graph, which goes scooting up over the last couple of years, is really worrying, is it not? I mean, it means there's a huge army of people who have never worked, who are going to have to be looked after by society for a long time to come.
It absolutely is. I mean, I think the statistic refers to those people who don't have to look for work at the moment.
Yeah.
And I checked just now, when we had legacy benefits before Universal Credit rolled out, it peaked at sort of, feels like about 3.3 million when you add up the core groups. I only had a couple of minutes to do the work before jumping on. So it is a big jump. It's not just people moving from the old style benefits onto Universal Credit. It is more people getting sicker, saying they're unable to work, applying for health-related benefits and getting access to them. So I do think there is this long-term question, which we need real answers to now, not further inquiries, not further research, not kind of more work is required to figure out the answer to. We need action now to stop people from ending up in that position, because you started your interview with Michael Gove talking about the impacts of people, particularly young people, who don't get into work straight away, and how much harder they find it later on. I think it's much easier to keep people in work and staying active than it is to try and get them into work once they've been out of work for a couple of years.
And so, Devon, in your view, does that mean that politicians have to jump right now back into the welfare controversy and remove benefits from large numbers of people who have got, for instance, relatively moderate, in the Tory word, mental health problems?
I would put two things ahead of that. I think the first thing you need is an economy that's growing, so jobs are there. I think a lot of people there are trying to work and are struggling to find work. If you talk to young people, they're being outcompeted by people who are a couple of years older, because the labour market for entry-level roles has softened, right? And what we need is a budget in the next couple of years that is job creating, next couple of days, weeks, that is job creating. That's probably the first thing that we need. The second thing we need is, I think, support to help people who are at risk of falling out of the workplace or have just fallen out of the workplace to get back into work as quickly as possible. They want to do that on the whole, but I don't think the support system is there. And actually what you're seeing is inquiry after inquiry saying this is how the system needs to be reformed without the action to do it. And I think it's the action to do it that we need to see now in this Parliament. And then subsequently, the end result, if we do not do anything about it, and we do see the number of people getting the support going up and up, is you do have a question of what do we choose to spend our money on? And that is a very difficult question for the Chancellor to have to answer. It'd be better if we didn't have to answer in the first place.
Some people argue that the minimum wage for younger people, it's not exactly very high, but is already too high and should be cut. What do you think about that?
I think it's the differential that matters, right? So I was just talking to literally a colleague of mine who's got a 16-year-old who's looking for work, and he's up against not 18, 19-year-olds, up against 28, 32-year-olds, right? So you're up against, employers are going to prefer people who have had a little bit of work experience in the past, where you don't have to sort of, they can't work on the alcohol till because they're too young, for example. I think we need to go back, and it's shocking almost how far we've come from a place where probably, I don't know about you, but certainly I started work at 16 in Woolworths. Work experience was kind of the done thing. It was like an objective of ways to help young people into work.
Potato fields of East Scotland in my case, but yeah. There
you go, like a civic responsibility on the employer, but also on the young person to go out and start doing that work. And I think we've moved away from that as, work experience is no longer required by schools. That would be a really important first step. For example, there are some quick fixes here, Andrew, I'd say.
All right, Devon Galani, thank you very, very much indeed for that tonight. Coming up, President Trump has threatened a number of media corporations with punishing legal action, but how serious is his latest $1 billion threat against the BBC? More on that next. Time now, 6:19.
This is LBC.
For anyone needing assistance when travelling with TfL, such as people with visual or mobility impairments, our Turn Up and Go service has staff on hand to help. It's available at all London Underground, London Overground and Elizabeth Line stations, and there's no need to book. Just turn up and go. That is how we're making the greener way to travel more accessible to all. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
When you're smiling.
Banning Dental Group clinics. With over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Every investor has a future in mind, whether it's seeing your kids through uni or picturing yourself retiring in Tuscany. The hard part can be knowing how to get there. JP Morgan Personal Investing can help you see the path ahead. With our intuitive app, expert support, and 150 years of JP Morgan's investing experience, you can start making more informed investment decisions today. Search JP Morgan Personal Investing. Invest with clarity. Capital at risk.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £95 million.
It'll have you dancing like nobody's watching. Yeah, baby. Just make sure nobody is watching. Get in tonight's Euro Millions draw. Play on app.
Estimated jackpot. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:20. When President Trump threatens to sue the BBC for more than $1 billion, is he being serious? Earlier on in the show, Michael Gove called that preposterous. Trump may simply be enjoying causing a quiver of fear to an organisation he sees as an enemy of his, but then again, he might mean it. Even if the BBC won its case, the legal costs would be astronomical, and the world will be watching. Probably a grovelling public apology is sensible, because otherwise how can the corporation shoulder the risk and the costs involved? Would the government step in, using taxpayers' money to back the public service broadcaster after that misleading edit? I can't see that being very popular. There's a huge problem for the BBC here, but also for the government and the country. Let's talk now to Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor, Katie MacFarland. Katie, good to have you back on the show. Donald Trump, as we both know, has used the threat of legal action in all sorts of ways during the course of his career and as president. He doesn't always follow through. Do you think this is, as it were, a kind of verbal cudgel being waved at the BBC, or do you think he means to go through with this?
I think he means to go through with it. As president, prior to being president, as president, he has launched a number of these lawsuits against media organizations in the United States, and he's won every single one of them. In some cases, it was financial. In other cases, it was an apology. In some cases, it was financial, but he had the money directed at charities. So in every single case, he's won. And the cases that he's won are far less egregious than what the BBC has done. You can't say that it was just an accident or it was a mistake or somebody hit the wrong button. This was a deliberate editing and splicing of a tape with the intention of making Donald Trump look like he was trying to bring down the Constitution and the government of the United States. So there's nothing accidental about this. And I think what's even worse is the BBC is paid for by the British people. So in effect, this is an attack on the American people, a duly elected president. And it was a constructed element by the BBC. And I don't think enough has been done in the part of the BBC and the people that they've relieved. There've got to be an awful lot more people who are involved in this. Who spliced the tapes? Who gave the order to do it? Whose decision was it to not review it or to review it and let it go? So I think there's so many unanswered questions.
Let's try and put ourselves, nonetheless, in the position of somebody in the BBC who's been tasked to respond to this. As I said just now, I would have thought a grovelling public apology may be the first place to go. But beyond that, what do you think they should be doing?
They should be looking, well, there's a bigger problem of not just institutional bias. This is not just bias. This was taking an active role of disinformation. This is the kind of thing that, Nazi Germany level. This is not what allies do to each other. So I think you got to look inside and make your own decision. But I think Donald Trump is very serious about this, and he ought to be.
Let me put to you, as it were, the BBC internal defence of this. This is not coming from me, this is coming from them. They say, in the end, Donald Trump did make a belligerent speech that day. In the end, the Proud Boys did march on the Capitol. In the end, Congress decided that his behaviour had been very bad that day, and therefore they weren't really misleading the public about the fundamental truth of the day.
Wrong. Completely wrong. If you go back and look at the two speeches President Trump made about an hour apart, in One, he said, march peacefully. He used the word peacefully. That was nowhere in it. And the way the BBC spliced two completely different speeches, different places, an hour apart, to make it look like Donald Trump was leading an insurrection of people marching on the United States Capitol. I mean, it's hard to think of how serious this is compared to other things that have happened with fake news and, people spinning things one way or another. This was not a spin. This was a deliberate attempt to blacken and damage a president of the United States, and done in such a deliberate way that it's hard to see who comes out of this with any kind of glory other than the American people who are going to stand up for their rights through the president of the United States.
So given your feelings about this, would it be your view as well, it would be a wise move by the British government to keep out of this?
Keep out of this, or make sure that, groveling apology, I think is way past the need for that. If I were the White House press secretary, for example, right now, I would pull the rights of BBC to be in any American briefings of any government officials. It's a privilege to be a White House correspondent. It's a privilege to go to the Pentagon and report. BBC has not shown itself worthy of that privilege.
Let me try one more time, as it were, on behalf of the BBC, which is that overall it's had a very, very good record in impartiality over the decades. It is one of the great British institutions. It's now under very strong criticism, not only from the United States and the White House, but also from the Kremlin. And there is a feeling that perhaps all of its traditional enemies, including actually in Tel Aviv, are all, as it were, lining up to give it a good kicking. And that in terms of what Britain stands for around the world, it's an institution that we have to protect.
It's an institution, as you point out, that has a glorious history, but current day not. And it's not just what they've done to Donald Trump in trying to subvert the United States Constitution and free speech. It's what they've done in covering the Gaza situation. It's what they've done in covering the LGBT issues. It's institutional bias, but it's a lot more than institutional bias. They're creating the news. They're not looking at the facts and reporting the facts with a little spin one direction or another. They're fabricating the news.
And do you think that's a more general problem than this particular Panorama show?
Looks like it. I mean, I've done shows on the BBC, and I found the bias was apparent. And if you look at the editing, I would think right now, if I were someone involved in the BBC, I want to go back and look at all of the documentaries we've done. What is our name on? Have we done this in the past? Is this just a one-off? Is this just institutional bias? Or is this a symbol of a much bigger rot at the heart of the BBC and public broadcasting?
Well, there is a very, very important and pungent warning for the BBC. Katie, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC today. And now for more of an insight into the legal challenges alongside Trump bringing this case, Neama Rahmani, the Californian attorney with the West Coast trial lawyers and former federal prosecutor. Neama, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Can I ask, first of all, there's been a great debate about whether President Trump would bring the case in Britain, which seems to be harder for him, or, for instance, in Florida. What would be the advantages for Trump of bringing the case in the States?
There's two advantages for bringing the case in the United States, Andrew. The first is the statute of limitations hasn't run. This Panorama episode was aired in October 2024. And we know in the UK, there's a 1-year statute on defamation. So those claims have long since run. Now in Florida, it's a 2-year statute. So we're still within the window. And of course, it's a more favorable venue, a hometown advantage. Of course, Mar-a-Lago is there, and the jury pool there likely is going to be more favorable to the president than the BBC.
In terms of what the plaintiff, in this case the president, has to demonstrate, is the law easier for him in the States than it is in the UK?
The law is actually harder. In the UK and most of Europe, the burden is on the defendant in a defamation case to prove that the statement is actually true. Here in the United States, the plaintiff has to prove that it's false. And when you're a public figure like Donald Trump, maybe the most public figure, you have to show malice. That means that the defendant knew the statement was false or acted in reckless disregard for the truth. That's not an easy legal hurdle to clear.
President Trump is not a man known for his understatement. Do you think that we can take the demand for more than $1 billion in damages seriously?
I don't think that's serious. And look, I agree that the statement was arguably false, but $1 billion in damages reminds me of Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. I mean, this is someone who, love him or hate him, you know, most people have a strong view of the president of the United States. And the previous defamation cases that he's filed, the one against CBS and Paramount related to 60 Minutes, that settled for $16 million. Against Disney, ABC, and Stephanopoulos settled for $15 million. I wouldn't be surprised if this one also settles within the $10 to $20 million range. $1 billion seems like a bridge too far.
Well, after a serious warning from Katie MacFarland, there's a little bit of reassurance for the BBC. Mr. Rahmani, thank you so much for that. The Bell Hotel in Epping, scene of all those protests and counter-protests after an asylum seeker molested a local girl, can continue to house asylum seekers, a court's ruled. Our reporter Helen Hoddinott is here with me and the latest.
Andrew, the council painted this case as a kind of David and Goliath battle in which Goliath won. Epping Forest District Council tried to get the courts to permanently block it from housing migrants, with lawyers arguing that its change in use from a regular hotel to asylum accommodation was a flagrant and persistent abuse of planning controls by the hotel owners, arguing that it has caused increasingly regular protests and also has been traumatic for local residents. But today, the judge dismissed the council's case, saying that he recognises there has been a material change in the use of the hotel, but that the breach is far from flagrant and the degree of planning and environmental harm resulting from the current use of the Bell is limited. But he acknowledges that crimes have been committed by a small number of migrants, and that also he acknowledged the Home Secretary's duty to house asylum seekers.
Early days, I've seen sort of political reaction in Westminster. Has there been any reaction locally?
Well, the council has responded, calling it a devastating day for local democracy, saying they were outgunned by bigger and more powerful interests, and saying that the Home Secretary can still reconsider. They've also referenced what they call the extremely stressful experience for the local residents.
Because, of course, this doesn't mean necessarily the government will put asylum seekers back into that hotel.
Asylum seekers, there are 138 male asylum seekers in the hotel at the moment. They will continue to be housed there. The Home Office has said that they do still stand by their promise to close every asylum hotel. They say they will work to do so as swiftly as possible in an ordered manner, and added that this judgment allows them to do that.
Helen, thank you very much indeed for that. Now then, up next, what counts as terrorism? The Independent Commission on Anti-terrorism says its definition is too broad and it requires reform. I'll be joined by one of its members in a few minutes, but the time now is 6:32, and here is Tim Humphrey with your news headlines.
91 prisoners have been mistakenly released between April and October this year in England and Wales. That's 13 a month. The Ministry of Justice data comes as several high-profile cases ramp up pressure on the government to address the prisons crisis. Asylum seekers can continue living at a protest-hit Essex hotel after a local authority lost a legal action. Epping Forest District Council has failed to get a High Court injunction blocking their accommodation. Ministers say new evidence means they're reconsidering a decision that WASPy women should not receive compensation. It relates to women born in the 1950s whose state pension age was raised to match that of men's. LBC weather, rain easing tonight and moving into the east, mild in the south but chilly in the north, and a low of 6 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Stand firm or surrender. That's the decision the BBC has to make now that Donald Trump has threatened a $1 billion lawsuit. What's it going to do?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
At TfL, we're making tube journeys faster in the future, with signalling improvements underway on the Circle, District, Hammersmith and City and Metropolitan lines. And there's also the Elizabeth line, already giving you fast journeys across central London. That is how we're making the greener way to travel brighter for everyone. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Elizabeth line is fast compared to other TfL modes. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Great to see you back at Specsavers. OK, could you read out the letters on the wall for me?
Yep. DEALS? Yeah, DEALS. Deals.
Oh, right. Our Black Friday deals are eye-catching, but the letter chart's over here.
Oh, sorry. At Specsavers, we've got all sorts of unmissable Black Friday deals, like up to £50 off one pair of designer glasses. Offer ends on 7th of December 2025. Conditions apply. Ask in store for details.
Experience. It's knowing the difference between a good deal and, well, a great deal. Right now, get 3 months free when you take out Saga Health Insurance. You get 24/7 GP access whenever you want it, and the freedom to choose your preferred private hospital with your own room should you need it. Search Saga Health Insurance for a quote today. New customers starting a policy before the 27th of November pay by monthly direct debit for the first year. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:35. 3 prisoners who were released from British jails by mistake are still at large, the Justice Secretary David Lammy told the Commons this afternoon. For context, 57,000 people were released in the same period, the year to March, and 262 were released by mistake. The numbers emerged during, frankly, bad-tempered exchanges in the Commons. LBC's political correspondent Aggie Chambre is with me. Aggie, this is new information, and in terms of number of people actually out there, it's still quite small.
It's still quite small, but it's actually, the department wasn't planning to publish these figures. But David Lammy, as he stood up in the Commons, basically said because of the extreme public interest, as you can imagine, because of the headlines over the last few weeks, he had chosen to do so. So, as you say, 91 releases in error from prison between April and the end of October. But on top of that, there are these 3 offenders who are still on the run. Now, one of them failed to surrender to police and was released in December 2024. One of them committed a Class B drug offence, was released in error in August 2024. And one of them committed an aggravated burglary and was released in error in June 2025. 2 of them are British nationals, one is a foreign national. But here is what took the Commons aback, really took them aback, was the fact that police prison chiefs are investigating a further potential release in error who may still be at large. So there may be a 4th, but they don't know. They are not clear at the moment whether or not someone is at large, which led to this from Robert Jenrick, who's David Lammy's opposite number.
But the Justice Secretary is so clueless. He's literally lost track of how many prisoners he's lost. He says today a prisoner may have been accidentally released last Monday. Well, has he looked? He's either in his cell or he's not. What a complete and utter farce he's presiding over.
Now, Andrew, I have asked people in the Ministry of Justice how that can happen. I've not had an answer yet. But the Justice Secretary is saying that the fault lies with the broken prison system, talking about the fact that Labour has inherited that.
This is a crisis that we inherited in our prison system. And it's worthy of sober reflection because he knows, Mr. Speaker, that when they were in government, there were 17 prisoners released in error every month. He knows that.
Worthy of sober reflection, says David Lammy. Last time they were opposite each other, it was very, very angry indeed. Was the atmosphere any different today?
The atmosphere was different. It was almost like someone had said to David Lammy, have a different approach today. Do not go in with fire and fury. And actually he did, he apologised. He offered an unequivocal apology to victims of those who'd been released in error. But it did genuinely feel like someone had essentially said to him, don't do that again. And he actually did bring up PMQs last week and he said, look, I made a decision. I wanted to wait until I had all the details. That was, of course, when he was asked over and over and over again about whether
another case? Come on, David, is there another case? Yes or no?
He just did not want to answer. And I think we all came out of that PMQs thinking, well, there's definitely another case, but he didn't confirm it. So he did address that too, but definitely felt like a different tone, at least from him today.
An entirely different subject. Right at the top of the show, Aggie, I was talking about the budget and discussing the pros and cons of breaking the promise on income tax. Everyone's talking about it still. I just wondered what the latest kind of view on the Labour benches that you've been talking to is.
I think As always, Andrew, it is mixed. I think the feeling from people I have spoken to within government and on the Labour backbenches too is that there is a way that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves could break her manifesto commitments without resigning. But she would need to be very, very clear. She would need to tell a very effective story about what that money is going to be spent on. She would need to make the public understand, if they didn't already, that public services were broken, and this was really the only way to do it. The only problem I see with that, Andrew, is the criticism we have had over and over again, and MPs I speak to have over and over again, is this government is not capable or is not able to tell a convincing story about what they are doing and why they are doing things.
Yes, the sort of criticisms to say you can do this or that if you are absolutely brilliant politicians. That's a very, very big if, isn't it?
Indeed.
And finally, clearly, if there is a Rachel Reeves strategy here, it seems to be raise income tax. By and large, the Labour Party will like that, even if the public don't. Get rid of the two-child cap. The Labour Party will be delighted. And that is the way that she, as it were, reintegrates herself, reingratiates herself, if you like, with the Labour Party. But we had Rachel Maskell on the show, and the suggestion is that the left will not be particularly happy with breaking the manifesto pledge because they would prefer a wealth tax.
Indeed, and I thought that was astonishing, actually, from Rachel Maskell, partly because she's only been back in the Labour Party for about 4 days and then decided to come on your show and be rather critical. We've heard it from the Deputy Labour leader too, Lucy Powell, who said similar things. But someone in government was basically it because there were genuine concerns that actually people in the Labour Party might vote it down. And that is why they thought that it would be a big sort of tax and spend budget. And of course, because the country, they feel needs it. But it's really interesting to see we're already seeing those cracks and those people like Rachel Maskell saying to you yesterday that they wouldn't be happy.
Well, I was saying at the top of the show, I thought the whole budget fandango was ridiculous and should be abolished. But it certainly keeps people like you and me in work and in business. For now, Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Now, you might well have heard me in the past express some derision about the government's decision to prescribe Palestine action, even though I don't particularly like them as a terrorist organisation. Now, the Independent Commission on Anti-terrorism Law says the definition of terrorism is too broad and we need better parliamentary oversight and judicial scrutiny. One of the members of the commission, set up by a legal centre, is the former Attorney General, Dominic Grieve. Dominic, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Why is the current definition too broad?
Because it really says that if you're using unlawful means to influence the government, that is sufficient to constitute terrorism. That's Section 1 of the Terrorism Act. And we said that really isn't good enough. It's really about subversion, coercion, and those are the things that we ought to be looking at. So it's not a major change, but we think it should be tightened up. Now, you raised the question of prescription. That is linked to it, although it is also a slightly separate subject. Prescribing an organisation is at the moment very much at the discretion of the Secretary of State. The Home Secretary looks at the intelligence material presented to her.
And in this case, Yvette Cooper got up and said, Palestine action.
And now it may be that actually the information she had would fit in even with our new definition, because I do accept that in certain circumstances, criminal damage can constitute terrorism, and certainly under our new definition, we're tightening it. If it's criminal damage which affects serious risk to health and safety, national infrastructure, national security, or life, then it's criminal damage of itself, although it would still be a criminal offence which people could be prosecuted.
I guess what an awful lot of people listening will think about, and I think about, is the sort of cases of elderly retired people in clerical collars or whatever holding up little cardboard signs saying I support Palestine action and being grabbed by the police and handcuffed and put into vans, which seems absolutely ridiculous.
That's a very valid argument. And of course, even when the threshold is met, the fact is the Home Secretary has a discretion. And that is a discretion, in fact, to be exercised politically. If politically it is going to feed Palestine action to prescribe it, it's probably more sensible not to prescribe it. And the other thing that we've suggested is that at the moment, when you vote in the Commons on prescription, it's usually as a job lot. In fact, when Palestine Action was prescribed, it was along with two extreme right-wing organisations. And the
as it were, encourage MPs, let's be clear, to vote that way.
Yeah. And we think that's wrong. We think any prescription vote should be with the single organisation brought before Parliament. And the other thing is, there's no reason in our judgment why the Intelligence and Security Committee shouldn't be able to look at the underlying intelligence first and produce a report to the House of Commons.
Because get this wrong, as I would argue they have in this case, and not just the state, but also the police look like idiots.
Yes, any fight against organisations that commit crime, I certainly don't condone it. I make that quite clear. And the people who do the criminality need to be prosecuted. But when you're dealing with people who may be inclined to support an organisation which is breaking the law, what you need to do is to isolate that organisation. And prescribing it doesn't necessarily do that.
Proportionality in the end.
Yes, it is about proportionality. But I'd like to emphasise that without knowing all the underlying intelligence, I certainly can't say, or wouldn't be in a position to say, that the Home Secretary, under our new definition, wouldn't be in a position to prescribe Palestine action.
Dominic, let me ask you about another issue in this same area, which is, I can't give details of the cases, but there seem to be a couple of other people who are trying to mimic the Southport killer. In other words, they have very, very lethal and dangerous ambitions towards groups of people, young people, and so on, but they aren't ideological. They don't seem to be ISIS, and they're not far right or far anything. They're just really, really nasty and dangerous people, and they can't come under the terrorism definitions as things stand. Is that a problem?
I don't think that's a problem. The problem that we see is that Prevent, which is a scheme brought in to try to deal with people who may be inclined or attracted to terrorism, is not working for that category of person at all. So whereas there's quite a lot of evidence that Prevent is good at taking people who may be inclined to support a terrorist organisation and de-radicalise them and address that before they commit offences, the evidence is overwhelming that 90% of the referrals to Prevent are leading to no action being taken, and included in that body are people who have extreme violent views which are non-ideological, may well have been generated by a mixture of the fact that they're on the autistic spectrum and that they are also watching very bad things on the internet.
The dark web.
And the dark web. And we are concerned about that. And in our report, we've said this has got to be addressed. And probably it's best addressed through local authorities, funded by government, and through schemes that, in fact, provide a targeted service to those individuals.
That sounds very interesting. It's almost as if we need a completely different language for this now, Dominic. But thank you for that anyway. We've run out of time. Really, really interesting. Coming up, yet another stumble in the debate to get the assisted dying bill through Parliament, as an MP accuses the panel of institutional bias for not including any disabled people among their witnesses. We're going to talk to that MP in a few minutes, but the time now is 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
At 9, how do you solve a family feud? At 8, it's cross-question. But first, the government is dropping less than subtle hints it will abolish the 2-child benefit cap. Is this the right thing to do?
Ian Dale at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app.
Julie could part exchange her car. Or check out We Buy Any Car. She could be unsure if she got a good deal part exchanging. Or have cash in the bank with more bargaining power to get a bigger car for her five-a-side team. Totally played. Or total player. To get a quote in 30 seconds, enter your reg number now at WeBuyAnyCar.com.
Do you know your state pension age? No. Maybe you're not sure, or you don't know how to check. It's so quick and easy to check online. All you need is your date of birth. Knowing your state pension age helps you think about your future. So check yours today. Search state pension age on gov.uk and simply enter your date of birth. State pension age. It's good to know.
A Southern train is a place where you can have more me time. A chance to skip traffic and glide to wherever you need to be, with headspace to focus on more important matters, like if that cloud is a starfish or sunflower. Fast journeys without the rush with great deals at southernrailway.com. Terms apply.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49. British soldiers should have human rights laws set aside for them while they're on duty, according to 9 former military chiefs who've written publicly to the Prime Minister. They say that today every British soldier deployed must consider not only the enemy in front of them, but the lawyer behind them. Make their hands. Well, General Sir Nick Parker, the former Commander-in-Chief of Land Forces, was one of the signatories, and he told me the specific problems the letter was seeking to redress.
The issue faces in 2 different directions. It looks back, where this Troubles Bill that's being introduced to Parliament removes the old Legacy Act that was brought in by the last government, and that removes some of the protections that have been brought in place to stop veterans being brought in front of courts and inquests. But what that does is it sends a very clear message to the future that if you take action on behalf of the state in future operations, the state will not stand by you in the light of hindsight, particularly when human rights laws are used to judge your actions.
So if I'm fighting in some future conflict, let's not say where, but I'm fighting in a future conflict, and I think I'm under attack, and I let off some rounds and I kill somebody as a soldier, then in future you think it's likelier that I will end up in court being charged either with murder or some other offence?
I think without a clear framework which has the credibility of the state's support, I think that is possible. I mean, I do need to make the point that nobody who acts outside the law should be considered to be doing the right thing. A soldier must operate within the law, but they operate within the bounds given them, the context of the chain of command, and of course the state. And if you are a veteran who served in Northern Ireland, which was an insurrection, which was operated under domestic law with some additional factors like the yellow card, you believed that you were operating in accordance with the Human Rights Act, with domestic law. And suddenly, somebody's applying an additional judgment on you. And more importantly, in the way that the bill is being phrased, you're being considered as if you're on a par with those who are actually attacking the state. Mm-hmm. And that's really difficult to get your mind round, and it makes those who are fighting or may have to fight in the future extremely uneasy about the support they're going to get from the state.
We've had one case recently of a soldier who was charged and acquitted by a court, but how much does this fear, this worry kind of pass around serving soldiers? Do people talk about it? Is it really true that people are choosing to leave the army because of it?
Yes, I mean, just one thing on that case. I mean, that guy was acquitted, but the agony that he had been through for years as a over 70-year-old, and the thing that really gets me and my colleagues is that we, the chain of command, the people who should be responsible for him, were unable to take any true responsibility for what he was doing. And the state was absent. I mean, his commanding officer was dead. All the chain of command were dead. So for that individual, this is hell. Mm. And we see in this new bill a willingness from the people who are putting it, the government, a willingness to remove those protections. They say that they have introduced protections, but this sends, I mean, we've examined them carefully, and they do not appear to have any real legal credibility. So we believe that the same old turmoil is going to start occurring again. If you're a serving soldier and you're looking at this going on, you're beginning to think that this is not clear. It's not clear that you're going to be supported by the state. And then there are some people in those parts of the armed forces who are already doing things all the time to protect us, who have got evidence that they are genuinely concerned that this is the case. Mm. Now, clearly, we're not able to talk about that, but I do know that there are people from special forces who are leaving the military because they do not feel properly protected and underpinned by the state and the chain of command.
And when you talk about the reassurances from the government, you say they. But we're really talking here about the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. I have watched him being cross-questioned in the House of Commons about this, and every time he says, no, you're completely wrong. We have all the safeguards in place. I'm a lawyer. Trust me. What would your message be to him and to people listening about that?
I think what I really would, and we wouldn't have written this letter if we weren't really worried. I think the Prime Minister should call the previous chiefs of defence staff into his office for 20 minutes to explain to them why he believes that is the case. And I know for a fact that all of us, including those who are more senior to me, all of us are concerned about this, and I think we need to have a conversation with him.
Sounds like you do. Sir Nick Parker, thank you very much for talking to LBC.
Thank you.
A further row over assisted dying as an MP protests about the lack of representation for disabled and minority people on a crucial parliamentary committee. And Tom Gordon, the Liberal Democrat MP for Harrogate, joins me now. Tom, great to have you in the studio. Now, this is a joint parliamentary committee. There's all sorts of complications about that, but just explain as simply as you can what your worry is.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And what really frustrates me is throughout this process, there's been lots of rows about who should give evidence, how that should feed into the parliamentary process. I'm really proud to be on the Joint Committee for Human Rights. We're charged with looking at human rights implications of any and all legislation. We can do inquiries, thematic or legislative ones. And what we've ended up with is at very late stage in the day. The bill's now progressed through the House of Commons. It's in the House of Lords. And at any point since Kim was chosen to put forward that PMB in November last year, we could have started looking at this. But we've now ended up with a single evidence session that's due to happen tomorrow, where we're only taking evidence from 6 people and only looking at the human rights of disabled people and not taking into account all those other protected characteristics like race, ethnicity, age and other demographics. And it's really frustrating that we're now ending up being shoehorned into this position where we're just not going to get that spread and look at it in the round.
You would have thought that if there was one thing that was suitable for a human rights committee, it would be assisted dying. So it's a very strange position. Is there anything that can be done? Do you think that this could be extended to a second and a third session?
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that I've been banging the drum for. I published a letter to the chair of the JCHR the other week saying that we need to do a proper piece of work in the round that looks at all those different things. If we take tomorrow, for example, we've got 6 people who are giving expert evidence, and even just the issue of disability is not a single, we're just looking at it through a single lens. We've not got anyone who appears to have any expertise when it comes to how disabled people with different protected characteristics, backgrounds, different ethnicities, what their interactions with their human rights will be. So it's really, really frustrating. We should be doing better than this.
Let me ask you a little bit more generally, but still on the same subject. A lot of disabled groups are still very worried about this bill. Do you think overall the process has given them the reassurance they're going to need?
I think that's a really complex question. There's not a single homogenous view of disabled people. I sat on that bill committee that took oral evidence from the likes of Disability Rights UK and other disabled people with lived experience. On that bill committee, when we went through it line by line and over 400 amendments, we did see the inclusion of an independent advocate and a disability advisory board that will have to report to the Secretary of State every 6 months about how this will impact on disabled people. What frustrates me and what is just really, really, so lacking is looking at this in the round. Disabled people aren't one single group of people with all the same lived experiences. People in the north have different experiences to people who aren't white. And we need to make sure that we as a parliamentary body, we as the Joint Committee on Human Rights, actually look at that through that intersectional approach. That's what I'm calling for. I will continue to make that case.
Very, very important, and very good luck with it, Tom Gordon. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to LBC. Now then, the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has warned against attacks on the BBC, which she called a light on a hill for people in the UK and around the world, amidst President Trump's threat to sue the corporation for $1 billion. Earlier, I spoke to the Tory grandee, Lord Michael Gove, who's interviewed the President before himself, for his reaction to Trump's legal challenge.
It's a preposterous act by President Trump, and we should make it clear to him that the departure of 2 senior BBC executives and an honest apology should be the end of the matter as far as he's concerned.
and as far as many of us are concerned as well. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion, put your news categories in the order you'd like them, pause, rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish, but right now it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.
I wouldn't be telling you that...
The two-child benefit cap will be lifted in the budget. Whatever happened to pre-budget purder, eh?